Stand by.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Milton. It's our honor tonight to have Remco Bromlett, Chaplain for the City of Milton Police and Fire, to do our invocation.
Thank you. Let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, while the air is cold outside, our hearts are warm inside as we pause to pray. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, you promise to keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. And we receive that tonight, both as a promise and as an invitation. And so we resolve to involve you in all that we do, our work, our service to the community. And in that vein, we pray that you guide the minds and the decisions of the council tonight and the work of the city staff that is gathered here as well. Bless those that work for the city on a day-to-day basis. And we pray for your peace upon the city. I've been troubled by the many calls that the police are receiving to respond to domestic disturbances in the city of Milton. And we pray for peace in our families, peace in the homes of our city, and favor on all that call this town home. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Wednesday, February 18th, 2015 to order. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'll be happy to call a roll for the February 18th, 2015 regular meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Those attending the meeting who would like to provide public comment either during the public hearing or during the call for public comment, you are required to complete a public comment card prior to speaking on an item. There is no public comment for consent agenda items or items under first presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by the city clerk prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization if applicable. The City Council may allow public comment on either an agenda item or general public comment from a representative of such an organized group or association, provided that such an individual shall file a notarized affidavit that they have the authority to speak on behalf of said organization on a form provided by the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Pro Tem Karen Thurman.
Here.
Councilmember Matt Kuntz.
Here.
Councilmember Bill Luss.
Here.
Councilmember Bert Hewitt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Longoria.
Here.
Councilmember Rick Morick.
Here.
Mayor Joe Lockwood is absent for the record. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Our next item this evening is the approval of the meeting agenda. This is agenda item number 15043.
I would like to defer the social media policy to the March 9th work session and add an executive session to discuss land acquisition. Does anyone else have any other agenda item changes? Is there a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve what you just said.
I'll second that.
A motion is made by Councilmember Coons and seconded by Councilmember Hewitt. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposition. The next item is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
We do not have any general public comment.
Okay, then I'm going to forego reading the rules on public comment. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Will the city clerk sound the items?
Our first item this evening is approval of the February 2nd, 2015 City Council regular minutes. Agenda item number 15044. Next, approval of the financial statements for the period ending December 2014. Agenda item number 15045. Agenda item number 15046 has been deferred to the March 9th work session for discussion. Our final consent agenda item this evening is approval of a construction services agreement between the City of Milton and Prime Contractors, Inc. for renovation services at Fire Station 41. This is agenda item number 15047.
Is there a motion and a second for the consent agenda as presented?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as read by the city clerk.
Second.
There's a motion made by Councilmember Longoria and seconded by Councilmember Moore. All in favor?
Aye.
There's no opposition. There are no items under reports and presentations or first presentation. Will the city clerk please sound the items under public hearing?
This is an alcohol beverage license application, consideration of the issuance of an alcohol beverage license to Sterling Arcade, Inc., doing business as Paradise Bariani Point, located at 5310D Windward Parkway, Milton, Georgia, 3004. This is agenda item number 15031. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Good evening. This item, if you recall, was on a previous agenda, but we had it removed to this, I guess, defer to this agenda because of the sign placement. It was not placed in the right location, and so the applicant is now in compliance with everything, all the requirements of the city, and the staff recommends approval of this. This is simply a change of ownership.
Is there any public comment on this item?
There is not.
Okay. The public hearing is now closed. Is there any council discussion? Is there a motion and a second?
Make a motion to approve agenda item 15031.
Second.
The motion's made by Councilmember Hewitt and seconded by Councilmember Longoria. And we have a motion to approve the alcohol beverage license to Sterling Arcade, Inc., doing business as Paradise Bariani Point, located at 5310-D Windward Parkway, Milton, Georgia, 30004. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to the zoning agenda, will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the first item?
At the second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the mayor and city council consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning, use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains with the allotted time. The city clerk will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by the city clerk prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. Before beginning your presentation or comment, please identify yourself by name, address, and organization if applicable. The Planning Commission has heard the rezoning agenda items, and recommendations have been forwarded to the Mayor and City Council for consideration and disposition. The applicant shall not submit material to the Council during this meeting unless requested to do so. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Council in consideration of your application should be submitted to the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Council. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made, within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider this application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respected local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Our first zoning item this evening is consideration of U14-03, VC14-03, 14250 Birmingham Highway by Lauren Dillon to operate an artist studio, Section 64-1843, within an existing building and to request a concurrent variance to allow outside storage, Section 64-1843B1. This is agenda item number 15040. First presentation was at the February 2nd, 2015 regular City Council meeting. Ms. Kathy Field.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. The first slide before you is an aerial photograph that shows the property under consideration this evening. The current zoning for this property is AG1. The future land use map shows the future land use for this property to be low-density residential. This is a site plan that was submitted on October the 1st, 2014, which shows the existing house as well as the existing studio to the rear. Subject site. The subject site is zone AG1 and developed with a 4,988 square foot single-family residence and a 3,296 square foot metal shop building and other accessory structures built on 7.912 acres. The site is heavily vegetated with Chicken Creek as the north property line. The applicant seeks a use permit for an artist studio within the existing 3,296 square foot metal building. The applicant is requesting a concurrent variance to allow outside storage. The intent is to preserve the agricultural customs of the area as the artist uses traditional blacksmithing techniques to create his artwork. Staff undertook a site plan analysis, and essentially the site met all of the standards with the exception of number 1 under outside storage, and accordingly the applicant is requesting a concurrent variance for this. And in terms of the concurrent variance to allow outside storage, the proposed site plan indicates outside storage on the north side of the workshop building, which would keep the materials out of sight. And as you face the studio, this would be the area to the right. There is heavy vegetation on the site, and the property is higher in elevation and therefore cannot be seen. Staff's opinion that this request meets the following considerations for the concurrent variance. 1, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance. 2, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship. 3, relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good. Therefore, staff recommends that VC 14-03 be approved. Under use permit standards number 2, that shall not generate traffic, sound, smell, vibration, light, or dust that is offensive so as to constitute a nuisance. Staff notes that during the CZIM meeting and the DRB meeting, the adjacent property owner to the south was in attendance, stating that they experienced vibrations within their home while the applicant's hammer was in operation. Based on this input, the DRB recommended that the applicant install additional insulation to the building to allow staff to conduct sound readings. Since the time of that DRB meeting in November, the applicant installed additional insulation on the south wall of the workshop and pads to decrease the vibration. Sound tests were conducted by city staff at 2 locations on the property line. In both instances, the dBA decibel level did not exceed the allowable 65 dBA at the property line. In addition, staff did not feel any vibrations at those same locations while the hammer was in operation. Therefore, it is staff's opinion that the operation of the equipment used by the applicant does not generate traffic, sound, smell, vibration, light, or dust that is offensive so as to constitute a nuisance. Continuing with use permit standards, 3H, if applicable, hours for customers to visit the studio and delivery shall be limited to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. The applicant has submitted the following regarding hours of operation: Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 6 p.m., and deliveries as noted in the chart above. And the proposed hours during the weekdays and weekends are longer than the use permit standards permit. Therefore, staff recommends that the hours of operation be limited to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and 12 noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. In terms of public involvement, at the CZIM meeting, which was held on October 28, 2014, the applicant was present. There were 5 people also in attendance at the meeting, and the following issues were brought up. 1, hours of operation. 2, noise level of the work in the shop. And 3, vibration from the operation of the work in the shop. The Milton Design Review Board had a courtesy review on November the 4th, and the following comments were made at the meeting. And amongst those were that they suggested that the applicant be deferred until a definitive answer was ascertained as to what the noise levels were. Applicant was requested to have the noise vibration levels tested and returned to the DRB for the January meeting. At the DRB January meeting, the following comments were made: that the applicant added padding under the hammer and added insulation to the building. Staff observed the sound test while the equipment was in operation. The noise level generated by the equipment in operation is less than the city maximums as measured at the property lines. Also, staff encountered no vibration from the machinery. Therefore, staff has met the Design Review Board's request. That the applicant has met the Design Review Board's request. Under use permit considerations, 1, is it consistent with land use or economic development plans? Yes, the staff feels that it is. Under 2, compatibility with adjacent uses. It is staff's opinion that the proposed artist studio is compatible with adjacent and nearby properties if approved with the recommended conditions. 3, under parking, the required number of parking spaces is 1 space per 1,000 square feet. Based on this requirement, a total of 3 parking spaces are required, and there is sufficient space to provide these. 4, hours and manner of operation. The proposed hours during the weekdays and weekends are longer than the use permit standards permit and are not conducive to the surrounding area. Therefore, staff recommends the following: Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, Saturday, 10 to 5, Sunday, 12 noon to 5. Conclusion: if approved with the recommended conditions, the proposed artist student is consistent with the City of Milton 2030 future land use plan and policies. Therefore, staff recommends U14-03 be approved conditional and VC 14-03 be approved conditional. In addition, the Planning Commission did review this application at their meeting on January 29th, and they approved both the use permit application as well as the concurrent variance application. So in terms of recommended conditions, they are as follows. A, an artist studio within the existing 3,296 square foot building. B, the hours of operation shall be the following: Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sunday, 12 to 5. The hours of delivery shall be the following: Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. 2, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following: to the site plan received by the Community Development Department on October the 1st, 2014. 3, to the owner's agreement to the following site development considerations: to allow outside storage on the north side of the existing 3,296 square foot building as depicted on the site plan received by the Community Development Department on October the 1st. 4, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following: A, access to the site shall be subject to the approval of Milton Public Works Department and Georgia Department of Transportation. Also, driveways shall meet required intersection site distance, and driveways shall be improved within the right-of-way as required by the Georgia DOT. And that is my presentation.
Are there any questions of staff?
Just one. When we had our field trip there a while back, we're talking about that storage facility. That's where they're working on the outside artistic equipment out there. I think he had a piece that was out there when we were there for the field trip. That's what we're talking about on the north side of that shed, right?
Yes,
Okay, just to make sure.
yes. And I can concur with, yes, okay, yes, want to make sure, yes.
Any other questions of staff? First, we're going to hear from all those speaking in support of U14-03, VC14-03.
Our first comment comes from Scott Reese.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, I'm Scott Reese, Brumlow Reese and Associates, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia, 30004. I'm here tonight representing the Dillons in their application for a use permit for an artist studio on their property located on Birmingham Highway. Staff, I think, has done an excellent job of detailing everything. Really don't feel like spending your time or my time rehashing everything. The main point is it is a business that we feel completely fits within the special use permit idea of creating businesses that preserve some spectrum of Milton's rural past. It's non-retail. There's not going to be many people at all that come in there. It's kind of a unique and special design as far as the sculptures and the railings that he creates. A very small percentage of his work is the hammering or of the raw material, probably less than 5%. The majority of his time is in design and the welding and fabrication, which doesn't create any of the nuisances that may have been brought up in the past. We feel like we've addressed any of the neighbors' concerns. The noise and vibration does not exceed. It's within the allowable limits. The variance, the request on it, the material that's involved in this process is not conducive to inside storage. I mean, metal rods and base material, it just doesn't fit. So we've created this area, or designated it, that's shielded by the building itself from any of the neighbors, and then there 500 or 600 feet of wooded side up to Chicken Creek. So it's completely sheltered from any other owners. So we feel like we've addressed that. So just finally, we just feel like this is a proper use for this property, a business that meets the city designation of creating businesses with economic opportunity that create a diverse and rural environment in the city of Milton. It's just another way to preserve green space instead of having one house and 1 acre. I'm going to leave the rest of my time to answer any questions or rebuttal. Thank you for your time.
Our next comment this evening comes from Lauren Dillon.
Ms. Dillon's the applicant. She'll just answer any questions if
Thank you.
so.
That is all the public comment we have in support, and we do not have any against.
Okay. You want to use any additional time?
No, ma'am. I'll answer and be glad to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
The public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions for the applicant?
My only question was, obviously there were conditions that were recommended. Are those conditions acceptable for
Yes.
the applicant? Okay.
Any additional questions?
If it's okay, I'll make a motion. Well, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion that we approve U4-03 VC 1403 for 14250 Birmingham Highway by Lauren Dillon to operate an artist studio within an existing building and to request a concurrent variance to allow outside storage. Agenda item number 15-040.
Seconded with the addition that U14-03 is approved conditionally And VC 14-03 is approved as presented.
Agreed.
You're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilmember Coons and second by Councilmember Lusk for the to approve the motion with the recommended conditions. All those in favor?
Aye.
There is no opposition. Motion carries. Will the city clerk please sound the next zoning item?
Our next zoning item is consideration of ZM 15-01, 13895 Hopewell Road by Jeff Runner to modify conditions 2A to include a 40 by 60 pavilion on the site and to modify condition 1C to increase the number of guests from 150 to 250. Agenda item number 15041. First presentation was heard at the February 2nd regularly City Council meeting. Ms. Kathy Field.
Great. Our second application tonight, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, is shown, the property is shown in red on the aerial photo in front of you. The current zoning of that property is AG1, and this is the revised site plan that was submitted to us January 6, 2015. Here's some pictures of the property. This is the approximate location of the proposed pavilion on the west side of the house. In terms of background and history, the Mayor and City Council approved a use permit for an event facility in January 2014. The proposed event facility allowed only the existing structures and no other structures to be built or enlarged. The maximum number of guests permitted was 150. Since the time of the approved use permit, Mr. Runner has been working with city staff to design the necessary sprinkler system within the large house that is to be utilized as the primary area for events. There was no one from the community in attendance at the CZIM on January 26, 2015. There's a requested modifications are to modify condition 2A to include a 40 by 60 pavilion on the site plan, approved pursuant to U 13-04 on January 22, 2014. The applicant has requested in the letter of intent dated January 19, 2015 to replace the original site plan approved pursuant to U 13-04 with a revised site plan submitted to the Community Development Department on January 6. The site plan proposes to include a 40-foot by 60-foot pavilion. The applicant has stated the following reasons for the change in the letter of intent, which is as follows. Although our plans are to have most of the events inside the house, we do plan to allow a few outside events. We would rather build a nice-looking pavilion in which to hold the outside events rather than erect tents. Additionally, we have discovered that if we serve food in the house, then we have to install a full commercial sprinkler system, which is very expensive and requires extensive modifications to the house. If we don't serve food, then a residential system in the assembly areas are all that is required. This system is far less expensive, utilizes the existing water system, and is not in any way near as intrusive to the facility. For those events in the house that will be serving food, the food will be served in the pavilion, and then the rest of the event will be held inside the house. Proposed condition 2A to the revised site plan received by the Community Development Department in 2015. Said site plan is conceptual only and must meet or exceed the requirements of the zoning ordinance, all other applicable city ordinances, and these conditions prior to the approval of a land disturbance permit. The requested modifications continue. The proposed pavilion with no walls located between the house and Hopewell Road with the additional pasture between the pavilion and Hopewell Road, also owned by Mr. Runner, should not have a negative impact on the Bethany Oaks subdivision located further to the east. In addition, by building a permanent structure and not utilizing tents, the overall appearance of the site will be maintained. Therefore, staff recommends that condition 2A be approved to include a pavilion as depicted on the revised site plan submitted January 6, 2015. Also, the request to modify condition 1C to increase the number of guests from 150 to 250. The applicant has requested in the letter of intent to increase the number of guests from 150 to 250. The applicant has stated the following reasons for the change in his letter of intent. During the hearing for the original application, we stated that an event with 150 to 160 people was the maximum size we would like to host on our property. However, when speaking with prospective clients, we have discovered that many of them have an invitation list of around 200 people. Even though we are well aware that not everyone invited actually attends, we are not comfortable hosting the event that could lead to a violation of the use permit. Therefore, even though our target attendance is not to exceed 150 to 160 people, we would like to have the use permit increased to legally allow 250. Proposed condition 1C, the number of guests shall not exceed 250 people for a single event. Staff has evaluated the applicant's request to increase the number from 150 to 250 for a single event. Based on the applicant's parking plan submitted with the original use permit, the site can accommodate between 88 and 106 parking spaces. This meets the required number of spaces of 72 based on the largest assembly place without fixed seating. The ballroom within the house is approximately 2,600 square feet, and the proposed pavilion is 2,400 square feet in size. It is staff's opinion that granting the requested 250 guest limit would pose a potential parking problem on the site based on the fact that there are a maximum of 106 parking spaces. Practically, one assumes that there are a minimum of 2 guests per car, and sometimes attendees will attend without a +1. In addition, the applicant will be required to adhere to the existing conditions pursuant to U13-04 that requires artificial sound emitting from the facility shall cease at 10 p.m. and artificial sound shall be allowed only on the west side of the property. Based on the parking issue, staff recommends the number of guests be increased from the existing 150 to 200. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of condition 1C to indicate 200 guests. So recommended conditions. Should the mayor and city council approve the petition, the recommended conditions for U13-04 should be revised to read as follows. To the owner's agreement to restrict the use of the subject property as follows. C, the number of guests shall not exceed 200 people for a single event. To the owner's agreement to abide by the following. To the revised site plan received by the Community Development Department on January 6, 2015. And that is the site plan, of course, that includes the pavilion. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions of staff?
Kathy, I'm looking at the site plan here, and I don't see where the pavilion's located on it.
It's, yeah,
Walk down the
Right there. There's that.
So on the electronic one, it should come across as.
It's on the west.
The right one. That's what, it's not on this one, this is what was approved, so it would be on the, it's not the green.
it's on the west side. It's sort of a solid rectangle.
That's it. Okay. Here, give me that, it's gonna leave a couple up here. You guys want to see this one? Sure.
So it's actually in front of the house.
Yes, in a sense, yes.
Okay, what's the setback
No,
from the
okay.
road?
Why don't you, would you answer Robin? Robin will respond.
Earlier this year, Mr. Runner came before the Board of Zoning Appeals to get a variance to reduce the setback, and so that already is in place.
Okay.
So.
Any further questions of staff?
Chris, do we have any record in the however many months it's been since we approved the original special use permit of complaints or any recorded violations of any of the restrictions to the use permit?
He hasn't operated. He hasn't started yet.
Okay.
Oh, so-
Have we had any events yet?
So
Yeah.
I was going to
So
say,
there hasn't
it
been anything?
It hasn't risen to the level that I've heard about it. That doesn't mean there wasn't one, but nothing rings a bell.
Yeah.
Oh,
The-
I thought I remember the fact that there was stuff already going on, and so we were trying to catch up with,
Maybe that's a good question for Mr. Mellon who presents.
Okay. all right, I'll hold on to that. I'll hold on to that then. Kathy, there was a note in the front that was related to one of the hardships, or not hardships, but one of the issues that caused him to make one of these requests was related to food preparation or just serving food.
Yes.
I tend to think of those two things as being different. Is the issue that he can't serve food inside without the sprinkler system, or he can't prepare food inside without the sprinkler system?
We were trying to get clarification from the fire marshal on that, but it's my understanding that hot food cannot be not only not prepared but not served inside. That's why he wants to serve the food in the pavilion. Otherwise, it kicks in the requirement that he have a commercial sprinkler system as opposed to a residential. Without the appearance of food in that
And they can
existing
bring the
house.
food in once they have it.
I guess that's a question.
I think that's a fine line between if the food is served in the pavilion, can they walk it into the house? Or is it they're restricted from actually serving food within the house? And I think that's probably a good question for the applicant to better understand that
I'll save
restriction.
that one too, then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. They're good questions, however.
So, good. Getting back on the sprinkler issue then, am I to believe that they still have to put a residential system in there?
That is what he would like to do, is put in a residential as opposed to the commercial. It's less intrusive. And that's why the pavilion has come into being.
Rick?
An FPA 13?
I'm working on getting the fire marshal on the phone if we
Well,
need it.
yeah,
He's in West Virginia.
Yeah,
so
we
it's-
tried earlier.
he's not
We've
here
been
yet,
reaching out
so
to him this afternoon.
I'll see if I
so-
can't shoot
Yeah.
him a message that he'll respond to.
And that was probably a question maybe for the fire chief is, or fire marshal, what are the restrictions as far as the food? Because I think that's kind of material to what decision we're making here, and what type of events you could actually hold.
Right. Yes. And the staff actually came up with is drink a food as well, or not? Can you serve liquor in there? So we were trying to get clarification from the fire marshal. He's just out of pocket.
I'll wait on
So, yeah.
Matt to respond. I know I've gotten an email from him on this topic. It's been months ago, but I know that I've got a more thorough description from him. So I'll go find that, pull that, bring it back. So just hold that topic for a couple minutes, if you don't mind, and I'll see if we can't get better clarification.
Do we have any other questions of staff? First, we'll hear from all those speaking in support of ZM 15-01.
Our first comment comes from Mr. Jeff Runner.
Mayor, City Council members, hate to be in front of you again, but here we are. The
Can you state
pavilion.
your name and address just
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
record? Sorry.
Jeff Runner, 13895 Hopewell Road, Milton, Georgia. The whole variance for the pavilion is, when we showed it originally, we talked about a future, maybe having a pavilion. That was something that we were going to look at down in the future, but we showed it on our parking plan rather than on our site plan. Went ahead and we got a variance to get the setbacks reduced. That was granted. We were sitting down with the fire marshal and the mayor and the community development department, and we're talking about ways to keep from having to put a full-blown commercial system or commercial sprinkler system into the house. He pointed out that if we weren't serving food, and there's some question as to what serving food meant, the actual state law says that if it's intended for food consumption, then it has to have a commercial sprinkler system. If it's not intended for food consumption, then it can go with something lesser depending on what the use is. So we aren't, in our estimation, we aren't intended for food consumption. We're intended to be an events facility at which food may also be consumed. Talking with the state fire marshal, they agree that the code or the law is written, that's really supposed to be for restaurants. But it's kind of a gray area, so the fire marshal for the city of Milton, he interprets it to be any food that's consumed. Now, I brought up, he said it's because people sitting at a table eating would be slower to evacuate the facility than someone who's just sitting at the table watching or playing games or whatever. He didn't quite understand it. We don't really understand it. I mean, they could be served. I even asked him, I said, so we can be serving alcohol there. They could be sitting there drinking, playing cards, and that's not an issue. And he says, no, it's the actual food consumption that triggers it. So, and he also said we could serve it anywhere else on the property, and they can carry it in. We can't stop them from carrying it into the facility, but it can't be served there in the house. So we said, well, okay, we've already got a variance for the pavilion. We'll just go ahead and build a pavilion. And that's when Robin brought up, well, wait a minute, the pavilion isn't on your site plan. Well, we had it on the parking plan. It's all part of that packet before, but we didn't have it on the right site plan. So this is to correct that and put it onto the site plan. As far as the increasing the number of occupants from 150 to 250, we've run into a number of people who they would like to invite somewhere around 200. They think they'll get 175, 150, 160, somewhere in that range, but they aren't going to. Everyone's positive they're not going to get 100% attendance. But we aren't comfortable booking anything that would possibly put us in violation of what we had agreed to. I'll reserve the rest of the time for any rebuttal or any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other applicants wishing to speak in favor?
We have two in support, and these individuals could not make the meeting this evening, so I will read their comments into the record. The first comes from Mr. Tom Leonard, 13840 Bethany Oaks Point, Milton, Georgia. Our property backs up to the Jeff Runner's property. I want to write this letter to show we fully support the use of the house as an events facility, and we support the proposed variances as being requested by Jeff Runner. The Runners have always been very careful to not be a disturbance to the neighbors. Even though we know they have held a number of events there, they were so quiet we didn't even know they had occurred. Any disturbances we get in this neighborhood come from Cambridge High School and Kings Ridge Academy. They are so loud we can hear every event they have. Thank you for your consideration. And that's from Mr. Tom Leonard. The next comment comes from Brent and Chrissy Reeves, 15030 Freemanville Road, Milton, Georgia. As a resident of Milton, I strongly encourage the committee to approve the request by the Runners for the Yellow House Farm Events facility to serve 250. This facility is an asset to the Milton community and upholds the rural lifestyle that was the vision for our city. The requested capacity of 250 will ensure the financial viability of this property without negatively affecting the community. This facility will not only yield significant tax dollars to the city, but will preserve the ability to maintain its appearance and use rather than forcing the owner to find other suitable economic use, which could be detrimental to our neighborhood. Thank you. And that's from Brent and Chrissy Reeves. And that is the end of comments and support.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition of ZM 15-01?
We have one comment in opposition, and that is Mr. Theodore Cox.
Good evening. I'm Theodore Cox, 13860 Bethany Oaks Point, Alpharetta, Milton, I guess. We have no objection to the pavilion. Let me first say that. The horses left the barn with respect to that. And as far as the community zoning meeting, I would just make one recommendation. It comes about 2 weeks before the meeting with business travel. It's very difficult to make those meetings. If there's any way you could give it a little earlier notice, it would be much appreciated. This is my 8th official zoning meeting involving Jeff Runner between Milton and Fulton County. In finance, when a client continuously violates an agreement, we use the term credit fatigue. That's what we have here, zoning variance fatigue. Clearly, this is Mr. Runner's strategy. Just keep filing variances, and the opposition will ultimately give up and stop caring. But this is where our elected officials are supposed to act. Mr. Runner told the people of Bethany Oaks that 150 people was as many as he would request because he didn't want to impact the neighborhood. But now, because of money and financial considerations, he says that he needs 200 or 250. Why does it matter if prospective clients want 200? Why is this the criteria? How about making someone keep his word? It doesn't matter that the fire department said 400 people are allowed. It isn't about grandma or cousins, which is some of the arguments he's made before about some overages. It's about doing the right thing and holding someone accountable for what their prior promises were. The argument raised about the number of parking spots is somewhat irrelevant. Mr. Runner has openly written of his desire to use a bus and shuttle system to bring people to his horse show events. Thankfully, that was declined by Fulton County, or ultimately withdrawn by Mr. Runner after it was rejected by the zoning board. Parking spots is not the issue. It's noise and cars and alcohol and traffic. Please reject any use of buses and shuttles and keep this facility to 150 people. I don't know if the City Council realizes how loud 200 people are when they're about 2.5 square acres away from your home. Some of you live on 5-acre lots or more. Imagine 200 people on the very outskirts of your property. And it isn't an infrequent event. It can be 2 times each weekend for the entire summer, perhaps 50 times per year. We have heard about some noise monitoring systems. I still don't understand what that is. And yet the city is about to apply the same noise ordinance to Mr. Runner that also applies to Montana's bar. A bar on Highway 9 has the same noise standard as a party venue bordering a subdivision on AG1 land. Can this actually be the case? And also, just with respect to what you just heard, there seemed to be so much talk about noise and the hours of operation. That isn't one of the concerns that we're talking about with this particular facility. Let's talk a little about hours of operation and why more people matter. We know artificial noise must stop at 10 and events must end at 11. But what time does the last alcohol-filled person leave? When does the caterer leave? When does the band leave? The staff leave? 1 a.m., 2 a.m.? This has not been addressed by anyone. And it ties into what you've approved for the traffic flow. In all the maps that you see this 1 acre of lot, but we're really talking about 2 distinct properties. You have a newly permitted path of traffic to enter one way and exit out to the south, several hundred yards directly behind my home, and exit out via the main barn near Yellow House Farm. This traffic will flow till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. There are absolutely no limitations on when any of this traffic can take place. Again, imagine if this were 2.5 acres from your home. 100, 125 cars, trucks, doors, people's voices, 1 a.m. If some of Mr. Runner's neighbors are in favor of this facility, then they should not matter that the traffic flow exits the same way it enters. We would ask you to reconsider the traffic flow and restrict all cars, parking, trucks, and noise to the lot in question. Do not allow it to flow out the other way. As I've said to you in writing, you need to experience what we experience. You need to come to our home at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and listen to the bands and listen to the noise and listen to the voices and watch the trucks and the cars and the traffic to truly appreciate what we're dealing with. Zoning laws are written for a reason, and variants are supposed to be approved for hardship, and especially if there's not a nuisance that are detrimentally impacting neighbors. This is no longer about preserve rural Milton. And I think we all know that, and I've expressed that to you in writing, why preserve rural Milton was really just a beautiful political argument. This is about one person profiting at the expense of others. Please reject the proposal for 150 people. Reject the proposal of 250 people. Want to say 150 plus or minus 5%? That's fine. But 250 people is just taking advantage of the neighborhood. Thanks very much.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
That's all.
So you have a little bit of time left for rebuttal.
I just want to say we haven't changed our plans ever from the get-go. We still are planning for events that will have between 150 and 165 people in them. We're going to put a financial penalty in for anyone who wants to have more than that. When we originally submitted, we were asking, I don't even think we had a limit on it. And when they asked us what we thought, we asked for 250. So we haven't changed that at all. We've been looking at this plan right from the get-go, so nothing's changed. Thank you.
The public hearing is now closed. Is there any council discussion?
So Kathy, all right, I'm getting a little confused now because I was going to ask questions about, earlier about, complaints or, issues with current operation of the facility. And apparently there's no events that have taken place, yet I just heard a citizen say, you ought to come out and live in my house and listen to all the noise and the band and everything else. So are we having events at this facility right now, or are we not?
Well, I'd like Mr. Runner to come up, but from memory, I believe that when we last approved it, he had 2 weddings that had been booked there, and he said that he was going to allow those weddings to take place because they'd already been booked. And is that correct, Mr. Runner?
No, they were prior.
They were prior, so...
So there hasn't been anything.
We had my daughter had a Christmas party there that ended at 8 o'clock one evening. We've had a couple of birthday parties for our grandkids, or one birthday party for our grandchild, and just a couple private things that, like a family event there. But we have not had booked any events yet, no. It's not completely wrong.
If you wish to speak, you have to come up and speak in the microphone, and you have to speak only when a council member asks you a direct question. So if anyone would like to ask Mr. Cox a question, then he's welcome to come up and speak.
Yes, please. Mr. Cox.
Yes, sir.
I'm getting...
He's using the date of when the zoning meeting occurred, but there were events that occurred prior. He was holding events prior to even asking for the special use facility. That's the point.
I'm just going to be real prescriptive. In the last 30 days, have there been any events?
No, sir.
In the last 6 months, have there been any events?
No.
Okay, so this would have occurred more than 6 months ago?
Correct.
What you're talking about? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
I've got a question to Kathy regarding the hours. We heard what Mr. Cox had addressed as far as concerns. I think we were pretty discreet when we approved another one of these as far as what time people had to exit. If the music stops at 10, can you just kind of run through what the current requirements are or restrictions?
Yeah, let me ask Robin to do
I
that.
have-
That was part of the last use permit.
Yeah, so what was approved earlier, or last year, was regarding sound. It says, artificial sound emitting from the facility shall cease at 10 p.m. Artificial sound shall be allowed only on the west side of the property. So those were the only conditions that you made at that time for this specific use. But also the use permit has its own timing requirements, and that is hours of operation shall be between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. when adjacent to residential districts or AG1 district use for single-family dwellings, such as in this situation. So technically, the hours of operations can go up to 11 p.m. because you did not give additional hours limitations other than for the artificial sound.
So 11 p.m. At 11 p.m. is that when
Everybody should be
the
vacated.
guests have to be gone?
Right.
Okay, so it won't be going until 1 o'clock or midnight.
Right.
Any variance at all on the days of operation in these hours? And what was approved?
Let's see. The days. There were no days limitations.
Okay, so it's 10 p.m., all artificial sound on any day for any event ceases 11 p.m. Basically, they've got to be off property.
Right.
It's got to be broke down, so the caterers, everyone needs to be gone, leaving no later than 11 p.m.
I mean, I think the event could leave, and within reason. I mean, we're not going to be splitting hairs over 15 or...
But that intent would be to have the party or the event to cease
Right.
and guests gone by 11 o'clock and not dragging on until 1 o'clock.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
Any additional questions?
Along that same line, and I don't recall all of the hours that were specified here. Sunday is exceptional, is it not?
It's not in this. There were no conditions to limit Sundays at all. I think you're thinking of the Little River Farms.
Right.
You all were very, very specific about the days of the
That's right.
week and the weekends.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
which
Talking
that
about-
was not specific in this case.
Okay, talking about the Little River Farm, which we approved last fall, what was the allowable occupancy?
It was 250.
Yeah, so following up on that, I remember a lot about this originally coming before us and some of the debate that we had related to, should we allow it, should we not allow it? If we allow it, what restrictions do we put on it? I mean, it was a, I'd call it fun, but it really wasn't that fun. And I have a little bit of difficulty fixing something that I don't know is broken. Because here we are, we granted this a good 10, 12, it could have been
January of
a year ago.
2014, yeah.
We haven't had any events, and yet we're looking at changing something. So Kathy, I mean, from your point of view, why do we need to make changes? I mean, I get the structural thing. I understand the pavilion requirement. I think the pavilion is actually unique because it's going to be set on the other side of the house. It's going to have very little impact. All the things that you listed as reasons why it makes sense to allow that, I would agree with. But when it comes to the number of people in attendance, I would rather get some time under our belt operating under the conditions that we originally granted so that we can see if there are any difficulties, we can see if there's any problems related to parking, we can see if there's any issues related to noise, all of those things, and sort of test the ground before we just start changing what we spent a lot of time debating last time. So that's the problem that I have. It's like we were negotiating with ourselves. We said, after a lot of discussion, let's set this for 150, 160, and now nothing's really changed. We haven't even had any events, and here we are, we're back at the table saying, well, that decision probably wasn't as good as another one we can make. So I'm a little confused on that. I really don't think it makes sense at this point. I'm sure there was a question in there somewhere, so maybe I was just venting my thoughts on the matter.
Any additional questions of council?
I think we still have the outstanding question on the food and the sprinkler system that Chris is working on.
Well, as regards to that, I'm not sure that's really relevant to this discussion.
Yeah, the only reason I think it came up was because that was a statement of hardship, and then, but as far as the approval of the pavilion, no.
Because I think
The sprinkler system is kind of a separate issue that it's up to the fire marshal's decision
Well, I think that
as
was,
an occupancy issue.
but I think that was why he expressed the need for the pavilion, is so that he'd have a
Right.
place under cover to serve the food that would be permanent.
Correct.
So,
And just, I think if we were to go forward with the pavilion, which it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of opposition, that wouldn't, just to be clear, that wouldn't, if we approve that wouldn't say, okay, you don't have to do X sprinkler system, that's still up in the, potentially up in the air.
I do have a question of staff, but we haven't seen any pictures of what this pavilion might look like. Is it something that would have to go before the
Design review board.
design review
Yes,
board?
it certainly would, yes.
So this would be merely approving the building of a structure of this size in that location.
Correct. Modifying the site plan to show it on the plan, but the actual architectural review would have to go to the DRB.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with Councilperson Longoria's thoughts on this as far as the guest increase.
I will tell you, going through this process, though, it is there is that 200 mark is really kind of a cutoff with the looking for places to have events. And if you're looking at wedding sizes, it's I don't know that he needs 250, but it seems like 200 would open it for a lot more events, just an additional 50 people. Do we have any other questions?
So, okay, well, that's a good point. So, Kathy or Chris or anybody, if Mr. Runner, let's say we didn't change the number of people that we allow for. Let's say we set it's at 150, 160, whatever it is. It's set there. And let's say something happens and Mr. Runner takes on an event that he knows is going to be above that number. Let's say he knows in this one particular case, there's going to be 220 people there. We're not worried about parking. We're not worried about those things because we know we have the capacity to do that. Is there an option for him to come to the city and say, hey, in this particular case, I'm going to have 220 people? Or does he just operate under the cover of his existing permit and hope nobody catches him?
I think it's the latter and not the former.
Yeah, you don't do.
I was hoping that wasn't going to be the answer.
And unfortunately, you don't ever know how many will show up when you invite them. So, I mean, that's part of the challenge. And
well, caterers figured out a way of doing it. They always,
Yeah, but the problem is you don't know that
charge it.
until 2 weeks, a week to 10 days before the wedding. And that's when you have to give the caterer the final number. That's not when you can book a location.
Right.
So.
Well, to that same point, I guess looking at the probability of having attendance over 160 up to 200, since he's already approved to 150, 160 level, could an increase over and above that threshold be allowed by an administrative variance on a case by case?
We don't believe so.
Answered that.
Did you get us any information on
I'm working on it. I found a fire
serving
marshal
food
in
and
West
fire
Virginia
sprinklers?
who doesn't have phone service but has internet, phone on Wi-Fi. And I found our assistant fire marshal who hasn't had power since Monday in a house that's 41 degrees. So they were both excited to hear from me tonight. I posed the question, and preliminarily I've gotten back an answer, and I'm still waiting for one as I'm sitting here, but I figure it's better to be in the room than not in the room, is that they believe that there is a nuance between the actual either serving it or preparing it versus the consuming of it, if we're talking about food and drink. And I need to get that confirmed before I say that is the fire marshal's position. But the belief at this point is that was the whole purpose of this pavilion, was so that it could be served in a place that met a code, and then the consuming of it can kind of happen wherever. But I need to confirm that's in fact his position.
And that would be more of a, I guess, with community development and the fire marshal working with him, Mr. Runner, on what he actually has to have and where he can, what type of event, where his events can be held.
Oh yeah, I went back and I forgot to what extent that we had been back and forth in communication on this topic until I went and tried to find that email to put my hands on that answered the question. There was emails about an A3 space and an A2 space in the 2012 International Building Code, and so I found a bunch of stuff that I just I don't want to come out and preach to the council that it is in fact what it is, because I really need to hear from the fire marshal what his position is. But we're working on getting you an answer on that topic.
Well, while you were out, we talked about that issue, and really doesn't have any relevancy to the application here right now. That really applies to his original permit, use permit.
I was watching the discussion while I was out, so I saw that. And yeah, I guess that could be one of the things that the council will say, is that all that's in front of us tonight is the request to add a pavilion to the site and to increase the occupancy. And what he does beyond that, And how the use of it occurs, it is going to occur in accordance with the code. It's going to occur within the International Building Code and our local ordinances, and the fire marshal's there for the purpose of helping allow that to take place. But to the extent the council uses the answers to those questions in its decision-making process, I think they're fair questions as you debate. So let me see if I can get you a good answer.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Runner a couple of questions. So, Jeff.
Yes.
Is this have you not started having events at the facility because you just aren't really prepared to have those events, or has it been, because, I mean, it seemed like a year ago when we were talking to you, you knew it was going to take a little bit of time. I didn't get the impression that it was going to be a year from then.
I didn't either.
And, yeah. So what are your challenges right now?
The challenges are taking an old house and trying to comply it to get it in compliance with today's commercial codes. And we've had, as the city manager said, we've had numerous meetings on this, hundreds if not thousands of discussions on and the sprinklers is the big thing. The handicapped accessibility, the bathrooms, there's no problem there at all. The challenge is the sprinklers. And to do what the new commercial code that the city has adopted for sprinklers, we have to sprinkle every closet, the attic, every porch, every entertainment center, anything that's closed and built in has to have a sprinkler in it. And it would require a 6-inch water line or water main, coming from the main, coming through. We'd have to have fire department access or hook up to it. We're talking, $100,000, if not $200,000. I mean, the water meter alone is $57,000 for a 6-inch water meter, and that's what it was 6 months ago. It could be $80,000 today. They're changing. But the biggest hurdle we're coming over is just not a clear understanding by anyone of what the actual code is requiring. And the fire marshal, and he's got his book, and he says this is what it says. But then when you talk to the people who wrote the book, they're saying, no, I don't think that's really what it means. And so it's kind of an ongoing battle. So we thought, well, rather than fight the battle that way, let's kind of do an end run and do it this other way.
Okay, so let's pretend a miracle happens and we have perfect clarity tomorrow on what exactly is needed. Mm-hmm. Okay, regardless of what is needed, how much time do you think is it going to take before you're actually having functions at the facility?
We could be ready construction-wise within 2 months. I hesitate to.
So you got a 2-month runway once we figure out what it really means and what you need to do.
Once we get the building permit.
Okay.
To do. And we've got everything else is resolved. And so we thought, well, let's go ahead and do an in run. Let's do the pavilion was on the site plan. We got the variances, or we thought the pavilion was on the site plan. We got the variances to build the pavilion. Let's just go ahead and build the pavilion while we sort out all this other stuff. I can put a residential sprinkler system in the house pretty quickly. We can get that up and rolling. And then if it comes back that we need to do more, because we can come back and do that. Okay. And address it at that time. And if I may, while I've got the mic, the increase in the people is 2 reasons. One was...
Well, hold on to that thought, because I'm going to ask you questions about that as well. Okay, so a year ago, when we were up here debating the virtues of supporting you in this decision or not, mm-hmm. we talked a lot about the number of people that you thought were going to be required in order to make things viable from a business point of view. I remember a lot of questions that we had that were very specific, because it didn't do us any good. In fact, I think we use this argument, it doesn't do us any good to permit you for a number that's going to allow you to go out of business in 6 months. Right. Okay? And we got some assurances from you that 150 to 160 was a good number and would allow you to operate and conduct your business the way you thought it needed to be.
Right.
Now, I know we haven't had any events there yet, okay? Do you think it's a reasonable idea for us to not change the number of attendees that are allowed until we get some...
Well, absolutely not.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that, but.
No, nothing has changed since we talked before, except, as Mayor Thurman has said, there's 200 is kind of the magic number with brides. Everyone thinks they're going to have 200 people at their wedding. And so when you start talking to future brides or future people who are going to have their weddings there, they're all, oh, we can't have 200. No, we don't want to talk to you. So we still contend that our facility is perfect for 150 to 160 and below. We don't want to have 200, but we don't want to preclude ourselves from being considered for a bride who thinks she's going to have 200 people there. And that's why when we originally came in, we were asking for 250. We're still back at that number. And then the other part is we've got the one over off of Batesville Road. They were approved for 250. So now it's kind of put us at odds with our competition, if you will. Although we don't know that, I think we kind of got different clientele. But it's really hard to get anyone to come and look when you say, hey, we're limited to 200 or to 150. So what we thought, because we really don't want to have more than 150 and 160, and I'm dead serious about that, we'll get them in and we'll say, okay, our group plans start talking about 125 to 150, you get this price. Well, we'll upcharge so much for over 150 that it'll discourage them. They come in, they look at the facility, say, oh yeah, I absolutely got to have my wedding there. It'll discourage them from going to the 200 or 250 mark. It'll cost them so much more per person for everyone over 150. There will be a financial penalty to them for doing it, and it's going to be enough that they're probably going to say, well, let's try to scale this back a little bit. But if you get them in the door and they see the place and they go, yeah, you know what, I can really have Aunt Josie not come. It'll be okay. I can cut her off the list.
Well, I can tell you how the timeline works. The bride wants to find the location first.
Yep.
And then she starts working on her wedding list. And then she meets with the caterer and finds out how much it costs per person. And that wedding list drops off 20%.
Right.
And then you get down to a reasonable number.
I agree with all those things. The problem is, I can't believe that these are new things. We knew these things a year ago. You knew these things a year ago.
That's why we were asking for 250 a year ago.
Okay. But when we were specific and said, are we cutting off your needs by granting you 150 to 160, you told us no.
Well, I don't think we knew then what we know now as far as talking, because we hadn't really talked to any brides. We really didn't know. We just knew from our experience 150 to 165 was a max number for us. We didn't realize to the extent that the brides will say, oh, well, if I can't do 200, I don't even need to come look at your place.
Well, I'm all for you succeeding in the business. I think that you got a beautiful place there. I just don't think that it's necessarily fair for us to negotiate with ourselves on this particular topic, but I understand what you're telling me.
I guess the question then becomes, why 150 for us but 250 for the other?
Well, if the two pieces of property were the same, you'd have a perfect argument. But since they're two different places, located in two different places within Milton, with different neighborhoods surrounding them, different road systems, everything is different about the two places. So it's hard to compare the permitting. So, let me tell you, they got it much worse when it came to the times of operation and stuff like that.
We understand. We just felt like when we left after the last one, we felt like it was just somebody just kind of arbitrarily picked 150. Because from what we saw from sitting out here, that we didn't see the behind-the-scenes discussions and all, but it just seemed like 150 was just an arbitrary number. We'd asked for 250. Council wanted staff wanted 100, so we just kind of met in the middle, sort of. So
I think, if I remember right, our biggest set of concerns had to do with the parking and the traffic, and it's it hasn't gotten any better.
No,
So okay, all right, thank you.
I've got a question for Mr. Runner. I know you've requested 250. Staff has recommended 200 and feels like that's the proper number as far as parking. What are your thoughts on that?
On 200?
Right.
We could live with that.
I had a question for Kathy. Can you kind of refresh us on why we have a different ingress and egress on that property, going back to Mr. Cox's concern about the traffic traveling south and exiting a different place.
Yeah, I think it was a constraint. Robin, that was, again, part of the...
It's part of the transportation requirements, but from what I remember, it has to do with sight distance on Hopewell, as well as just the general pattern of leaving, but I think a major part was sight distance.
Right.
So it's at a bad position if you were trying to take a left or a right as you come in his gated entrance versus if you go further south where the farm entrance is, it's a better sight distance to be able to go left or right, to leave.
To leave, but
Yes.
going in, the ingress was not going to be an
Right,
issue.
correct, yeah.
Correct.
At the other location.
Yes. So that was a requirement of Public Works to do that.
Carter's, if you need more information on that, Carter is in the building.
Yes,
just
he's
meeting
hiding
with
right around the
representatives.
corner over there.
Yeah, he just walked in. He
He's
was
hiding in the
meeting with
corner.
GDOT folks down the hall, so there you go. We've got the better expert here if you need more transportation stuff.
You want a site plan?
What was the question again? Yeah, that had to do with the restriction on the driveway width coming in and out. And so some of the existing walls and maybe some of the landscaping and trees in there prevented what we would consider to be a two-way entrance at that location. So the discussion on that was we'll bring them in one way and bring them out the other way to prevent any conflicts at the entrance at Well Road.
So the issue wasn't the line of sight, because that's where I was struggling, is why would it be different going in and different coming out? The issue was the width of the driveway. Basically became a one-way in and a one-way out for the
There could be some sight distance issues. I don't remember off the top of my head right there. I know we met out in the field to kind of review that. But I'm sorry, just off the top of my head, I don't know if that was a significant concern as much as just having enough width to accommodate two-way traffic up that entrance road.
Well, you typically wouldn't have sight distance issues entering the property, would you?
Not in that condition. If you're anytime you're making a
left
left across traffic, you want to make sure you have sight distance to that one particular direction. But I think the issue, if there was any sight distance, would be back to the north at that location.
to the north would be where the entrance is going in, correct?
Right. So when you look out to the north, I think if there was going to be any sight distance consideration, it would be if that was an exit looking back up to the north on Hopewell. I just don't recall what that particular distance is.
I remember that discussed.
If I could, counsel, as well, I just want to, it was good questions. And if you're using the answers to those questions in your formulation of a decision as to whether or not a pavilion is appropriate or the capacity should increase, then just remember that's what we're focused on tonight. Yep. The rest of those have already been granted in the initial use permit to the site.
Right.
We have any additional questions?
Not a question, just a comment on this. Obviously, the pavilion, I think, is a great idea from looking at it, and I saw that and thought that made a lot of sense. On the number of people, I tend to think a little bit more on Karen's point. I look back at my own wedding or weddings I've been to and what it was, and the number in and of itself is just a marketing idea in my mind. I think that, as it is, I think Mr. Runner's point is really dead on, that if you want to compete from that perspective, a bride's going to want to go someplace where she is thinking of all these people that she wants, because it's always overblown initially as far as who they're going to have, things like that. Not necessarily that they're bad people, but it's just they think, oh, we want to have this great big thing, because that's how it was with mine when I looked at it. And so I was the one that was mailing out all the cards, and it wasn't nearly 200, but we thought initially there would be 200 people we would talk to, and it wound up being closer to the 150 level. So I can understand that. I know that from a marketing perspective, we like to say that we can efficiently calculate exactly how many people we want unfortunately, because markets are inefficient, it's very hard to do that. I think we need to be able to recognize that if we know what that number is, and anything underneath that is acceptable, I'm okay with that. And 200 didn't seem like a big problem to me when I saw that in the staff recommendations. So I've been quiet here most of the time tonight because it made sense to me, and that's just where I'm coming from.
Do we have any additional questions of the applicant, opposition, or staff?
Council, if you'd allow me to, I have received an email from the fire marshal that I would like to just to share, just so that it is part of the record tonight. And Matt tells us that he starts by saying the way the code reads, and mind you, this is from the top of my head in a hotel room in West Virginia. So the trigger that would require the full commercial sprinkler system in the occupancy is the combination of the occupancy load and the fact that food and alcohol or drinks are served on premises. In order to allow the lesser sprinkler system, the occupancy load inside the structure would either have to drop below 100 or the food and drinks will not be served on that premises, in this case specifically the building, not the pavilion. So the code answer based upon my research is to say that the food portion of the event is served in the pavilion, not the house. By the code, the two venues would have to be kept separate. He does indicate that unless he's invited, he doesn't plan on being at each individual event and policing the plate of food that might make it into the house. But he does, on the record, want this to be a distinction. He says, I don't want this to be a distinction without a difference, though. It needs to be clear that the pavilion is the intended location for the food and drink service and consumption.
So it sounds like the threshold is 100 occupants, though. So you could serve food in the house if the occupancy load was 100 or less.
That's what, that wasn't a particular question that I asked him, but I can tell you in his response that in order to allow, and I'm quoting now, in order to allow the lesser sprinkler system, the occupancy load inside the structure would either have to drop below 100 or the food and drinks would not be served on the premises. So I guess for an event that would be, the key there would be the 100 folks. So
the food would have to be served outside if there's more than 100 folks.
Right. And consume.
Yeah.
Can I clarify that? That's occupancy load.
Right.
Okay, occupancy load is the number of square feet divided by what you intend to use that area for.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's an area where you're sitting down, it's 7 square feet per person. Or I'm sorry, if it's an area where you're standing, it's 4 square feet per person. If it's an area where you're sitting down with tables, it's 7 square feet per person. If it's an area set up as an office, it's 50 square feet per person. That's how they calculate the occupancy load. The occupancy load of our house, it doesn't change depending on how many people you have there. It's based strictly on what the square footage of the structure is.
Council, I'd just like to clarify that Mr. Runner's comments don't necessarily change the fire marshal's comments that I just read into the record.
Do we have any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
Close the hearing first.
Matt's got his paper.
Well, no one else does. All right. I would like to make a motion that we approve ZM 15-01 for 13895 Hopewell Road by Jeff Runner to modify Condition 2A to include a 40 by 60 pavilion on the site and to modify Condition 1C to increase the number of guests from 150 to 200. Agenda item number 15-041.
Per staff's recommended
Per
conditions.
staff's recommended conditions for 200 occupants.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I am in full support of the structure. I am not, at this point in time, in support of increasing the number.
Okay. Any further discussion? There is a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
The motion fails. Do we have another motion?
I'd make a motion to do what I suggested, which was approve the structure but not approve the increase in numbers. And I don't know how necessarily to word that, so if I need to.
It sounds as though your motion would be to approve ZM 1501 at 13895 Hopewell Road by Jeff Runner, approving Condition 2A to include a 40 by 60 pavilion on the site, and denying condition 1C, which would increase the number of guests from 150 to 250.
Correct.
Now, I'll second that.
A motion was made by Councilmember Longoria and seconded by Councilmember Hewitt. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
Councilmember, did that carry 5-1? Did you vote in favor
Yes.
of that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That motion. There are no items under unfinished business or new business, so let's move on to mayor and council reports. Are there any council reports?
Just one. Last week, our new Fulton County Commissioner, Bob Ellis, appeared, and unfortunately, he didn't have time to comment on progress down at Fulton County. And it appears that we have a balanced budget in Fulton County, and first time in several years, and that's, I think, commendation to not only Bob Ellis for being a leader down there, but the ability, hopefully, for the rest of the Fulton County Commissioners to work together and hopefully get something done here this year and the next 4 years.
I think we're definitely seeing some positive things down there.
I just want to say great job on the staff for all the weather conditions that came up, and with the branches that came down and the ice on the trees, and as crazy as it was, it's beautiful, but we haven't had a whole lot of problems up here in Milton on the roadway as far as I can see, and just want to commend you guys and our staff and everybody on the roadways for doing a good job the last couple of days.
And I'd second that. Driving all around the city, roads were cleared. You could see that limbs had been cut and pushed off to the side. There were a lot of trees and branches down, but all the roads were passable this morning.
Yeah, they did a great job. Any other council reports? Staff reports?
Yes, ma'am. Before I get into the staff reports, Councilmember Lusk, would you want to give a quick update on our visit with the Department of Transportation? Or do you want to hold off on that to a later date?
No, we can do it now. It's kind of an ongoing saga. We actually had two meetings last Thursday, it was, down at GDOT. The first meeting involved members from City of Alpharetta and the city engineer, Chris Owens, councilman, director of public works, and with Chris, Carter, myself from Milton, and we met with two individuals, well, actually Russell McMurray, chairman GDOT, and Joe, was it Wilson? Chief project manager. But we talked about, in that meeting specifically about the interchange that's proposed here at McGinnis Ferry and 400, and the impact that it would have on not only Alpharetta, but probably more so a negative impact it would have on the city of Milton, at least the way it is designed at this time. So McMurray understood what we were talking about and encouraged us to remain engaged with them, letting them know what our position is down there. That particular project, at least correct me if I misstate it, was part of the bond referendum passed by Forsyth County last fall. Ken can correct me on it too. And the new CID was formed in South Forsyth County last year, and they are a participant in this project too. They have no other funding from Alpharetta or Milton, contiguous jurisdictions that. So they're kind of going it on their own from that respect. Without getting into any of the politics or on that particular issue, it is ongoing. They have awarded a contract to Moreland Altabelli to begin design of that interchange. I guess they're going about it without any federal funding, so it's a challenge from that respect. But they heard us loud and clear down there as to how it's going to impact us, and hopefully we'll be able to stay engaged with them to come up with solutions that are agreeable to both us and Alpharetta too. The second meeting, the next hour, we met with was Forsyth County officials, Moreland Altabelli, Tom Moreland was there, Johns Creek officials, and of course Alpharetta and Milton. And the main topic at that time was the proposed widening of McGinnis Ferry, essentially from 400 over to Sargent Road in Johns Creek. And Forsyth County has taken the initiative to, as part of their bond referendum also, I believe, to fund at least their part of it, which is half of it, 50% of the widening, since the center line of McGinnis Ferry represents the southern boundary of Forsyth County and the northern boundary of Alpharetta and Johns Creek. After all of the pleasantries were given there in the first several minutes, and Forsyth County and Moreland Altabelli made their presentations on what they propose to do and how they're going to fund it. The obvious discussion turned to, well, Alpharetta, you need to pony up 25%, and Johns Creek need to pony up 25% also, which amounts to approximately $11 million from each of those two jurisdictions. And the thoughts or the comments that came from Johns Creek and Alpharetta was, we haven't been brought into this discussion, and we don't have $11 million, and we're really not interested. So is that fairly accurate?
I think you said it very nicely.
Without getting into any other
I think that's,
comments.
yep, I think you did a great job.
So.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? So along the same lines, as it impacts Milton feeding to that intersection, there's no funds dedicated by either GDOT or Forsyth County in actually improving the roads, which are going to become a cut through to actually get to that thing, which is the concern that I've raised.
Sure.
With Bethany Bend and Morris Road, that whole and that section of McGinnis Ferry, that is going to, it's already a traffic problem today. Mm-hmm. We're adding more housing on the Forsyth side. Question is, what are we going to do if that exchange, people are going to be heading that way instead of going down Windward Parkway, which is a 4-lane road?
And that was the position that we brought to that was the position, and I guess the data that we brought to that meeting was to put that on the table and to say, hear us loud and clear that if they get off and turn left, we're going to deal with it. We heard Commissioner McMurray say that the state's funds are distributed to local jurisdictions in the form of LMIG, which we know, and that there's not but a few scraps left at the end to potentially work projects, small projects here, there, and everywhere across the state, which makes total sense. That there's not people often mistake that the state just has this checkbook that they're willing to write checks out of, and it doesn't exist. That, and in the light of watching this House Bill 170 work through the legislature and what we end up with on the back end of that and what that means to us in 2022, there's a lot of moving parts here, and yes, we wanted to make sure that we put on the table that the widening of McGinnis Ferry, or the interchange plus the widening of McGinnis Ferry Road, even though not contiguous to Milton, affected Milton. It affects us there across that whole Bethany, all the way to Highway 9, and getting people to Highway 9. You could look at the map, and there's some logical points of where these projects terminate, and you can see why they terminate to some degree in places that they do, and they often terminate short of a creek, and I can't imagine that that's not by design. It's just something that it's good now that we're having the discussions. It's good now because these projects are fairly, they're a ways off. But there's multiple people with projects that cost a lot of money, and when you put those two in the mix, you always start out with the struggle before you figure out the solution.
Right. What did they give you a target when they wanted to have that exchange built?
I don't want to speak on behalf of Forsyth County, but I'll say what they said and what I heard in the meeting, and that was that these projects, even as they get into design at this point, there's a widening project of 400 that's to occur long before these projects in McGinnis Ferry ever occur. So we'll see an impact to better traffic, believe it or not, in North Fulton long before these come to fruition. So, we'll keep you updated. We're years off, so it's not like this is a next week let. They're still in design, and they're still about $22 million short.
I can offer, just in the capacity of the information I have, because it's on Tuesday's work session agenda in Forsyth County, that the memorandum of understanding with GDOT for the widening of 400 from McGinnis Ferry all the way up to what may be State Route 369 is that money will actually be headed down to GDOT by late May, and we're talking about a $53 million contribution by the county to fund a single lane widening both northbound and southbound.
I think the discussion surrounding that widening was that hopefully bids will come in under their budget, so they're going to carry that widening as far as that $53 million is going to.
That was the first time I've heard it ever get as far north as 369. So, I did hear at the meeting that they were impressed by how far they believed the funding would get them, because I had always heard Pilgrim Mill or potentially Bald Ridge Marina. So if they're now talking 369, that may in fact be where they're trying to get.
Well, and let me bootstrap off Councilmember Lusk's. Again, it's a matter really of what the bids show, how far. I think aspirationally that'd be the home run ball.
Thank you, Councilman, for that update. We've got. I just want to give two real quick staff reports. Then we've got two published staff reports. In a follow-up to the work session agenda that we had a week ago, I heard loud and clear the council's desire to move forward with securing some type of plan on our conservation initiative and conservation projects. To this point, last week I had a great 2.5-hour meeting with the Milton Gross Green Group over lunch, and believe we made some substantial progress. In their minutes, they accurately captured the discussion we had, so they were very valuable in what roles they, as a committee, believe that they should play in that initiative. I've subsequently met with many of our city staff members in working out a plan, and I meet with our conservation consultant tomorrow morning as kind of the three parts of that triangle to put together a recommendation to the council. And I'll bring back something to you probably around mid-year as to what we want to do from a staffing perspective on the conservation initiative / sustainability initiative of Milton. So I just didn't want you to think that had not been heard last week, and in fact is moving forward. Potentially good news, and I don't want to get too far out there, but good news with respect to the city's first TDR transaction. I saw that earlier today, so stay tuned. It's better news than I've seen yet. It's still by far a done deal, but it's much better news than I have seen to this point. And I also want to let you know that with respect to the response to weather, we have just as likely a second response to weather later this week. We're starting to make plans for what arrives in this area Friday night into Saturday morning. So we're going to be exceptionally cold tonight and tomorrow night, and then we're looking towards another winter weather event, and we don't know what that looks like. The state is still reporting in their outputs to us that the probability and reliability of their information is low. And so when you have probability and reliability of low, I don't want to share what it is because it has just as much chance that it'll change between now and Friday. But just know that's on our to-do list this week. We've published two staff reports tonight. The first is with Courtney Spriggs, our Public Outreach Coordinator. She wants to share with you the 2015 event schedule that's starting to form up, that kicks off this weekend with the new Broadwell Pavilion kickoff, and I won't steal her thunder, but we'd like to give you an update on that. And then Stacy's going to pick up where we left off at the work session last week, and we're going to try to get through this alcohol beverage ordinance revision so that we can bring forward something to the council to amend that code before spring. Courtney, take it away. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Courtney Spriggs. I've talked with most of you, but I haven't been officially introduced. I'm your Public Outreach Coordinator. I've worked here for a little while. I came from the police department, and that is actually what my background is in, is law enforcement. I worked in Lumpkin County as both as a patrol officer, a sergeant, and a special victims investigator, and then in Forsyth County as their community outreach specialist for the sheriff's office. So that is my background, and so this position offered me an opportunity to sort of widen that. So I'm not just talking about law enforcement or working with crime victims or answering to those questions, but with the city as a whole. So on that account, we have given y'all an updated list of our special events. The first, of course, our kickoff of the new Broadwell Pavilion, a beautiful, beautiful facility. I'm sure y'all have seen it completed. Hopefully, we won't all freeze to death out there, but apparently it's going to be very cold. We have heaters, we have the fireplace. Hopefully that will alleviate some of that cold, but we've got the plaque that'll be put up. We've got food trucks, a band, the Chuck Nation Band out of Murrayville, as a string band. They will be performing. We'll do the ribbon cutting, so I hope you all can make that. Also, thanks. Also in February, our Milton Mayor's Run and Jog for a Cause. We've partnered with North Point Pediatrics to hold that 5K, a Peachtree qualifier. It benefits our parks and then 3 different pediatric cancer foundations, so to help those families with cost. Their children who are suffering. Earth Day, I've met with Milton Groves Green to start planning Earth Day, April 18th at Friendship Park. A new event in May in partnership with Crabapple Community Association is Milton Hometown Jubilee, featuring local beer and wine, local foods, local restaurants, local vendors, things specific to Milton. And that's going to be in Crabapple, of course, at the Pavilion. Our Fulton Golden Games, that's in partnership with all of North Fulton, Roswell, Johns Creek, Sandy Springs, Alpharetta. We partner with them, and that whole month is senior citizens have different games they can participate in. Of course, Memorial Day, I'm going to get with Councilman Lusk, and we're going to plan that and make that exciting. Also new are Milton Farmers Market and food trucks at the Pavilion. You can see we're going to put that to use. Farmers Market will be, and food trucks will be every Saturday, starting May 23rd all the way through the summer, from 4 to 8. People, we put that out on Facebook and sort of got a feel for what the people wanted when they would like to see that in their community, and that was the response. Was definitely Saturday and afternoon, because in the morning they're going to Alpharetta's farmers market. So hopefully in the afternoon they'll come to ours. On 3 of those Saturdays we'll have movies on Broadwell, where we formerly had them in Friendship Park. Now we'll have them. We're going to shut down Broadwell Road and have the movies right after farmers market and food trucks on those Saturdays. And the movies we're leaning toward are sort of musical and family friendly, you know, that everybody can enjoy outside on a summer night after they've enjoyed the food trucks and farmers market. Our Canine Support Tournament, as always, in September. We'll help out PD with that. Crabapple Fest, again, in conjunction with Crabapple Community Association, will be October 4th. Veterans Day, In November, and our Christmas events, Christmas in Crabapple, again with Crabapple Community Association, and my favorite, the new one, the Breakfast with Santa at the fire department. That was a huge success last year. The first time we did it. Hopefully, we can get more people involved in that and make that even bigger and better this year. It was a unique to Milton event, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it a lot. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final staff report tonight is a pickup of the discussion that we started a week ago Monday at the work session. I've heard from a couple of council members, so I want to lead off this staff report and presentation by saying that the couple I've heard from that have inquired as to what ordinance changes we need to make to allow for there to be more mobility of people potentially leaving restaurants and frequenting other restaurants, et cetera, and having more mobility around the community as opposed to the strict adherence to the boundaries of a restaurant or the boundaries of a patio. These are the revisions that will allow that to happen. So if we work through this and we get to some level of comfort that we've captured correctly the council's desire and vision, we will expedite bringing these forward at the next two meetings in March for a first presentation and a second read, so that by the time we get to hopefully the weather starting to turn warm and spring being here, that if your desire is to give this flexibility to Milton's restaurants, this ordinance will allow you to do that.
So you're saying this will be on the work session in March?
We had it on the work session last week, and because we ran out of time, we were running late, we moved it as a published staff report tonight. So my goal is it's about a 20-minute presentation. My goal is to go ahead and get that accomplished tonight so that then the next time you'll see it brought forward is in the form of first presentation on March the 2nd.
Oh, so you're saying you want to go over this right now?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Unless you direct me otherwise.
No, I think we get in a rhythm, and by the time we get to staff reports,
You're like,
we're
done.
usually thinking we're done. And so I'm just warming up to the idea. Keep going. It's all right.
So I think the discussion will be about 20 minutes. We'll have a quick executive session. We'll still have you home before 9 o'clock.
We hope. Okay, so.
With a lead in like that, Stacy, this is going to be great.
So there are a few things that I need some guidance on, as I talked about on the work session last week. One of the things we started to get into was special events facilities. I talked with Roswell and tried to get out of them what they do with their special events facilities, and they said that their language, which we copied, is pretty vague and didn't allow for, I guess, some clarity that they needed to answer some of the questions that they faced. So in thinking about that, since that discussion I had last week, I have a proposal on this. So the way the ordinance reads, it looks like any special event facility, regardless of whether or not the owners of them, I'm going to get sick over here. Regardless of whether or not the owners of the facility will be serving the alcohol, or if they allow caterers to come in and serve the alcohol, it looks like they have to get an alcohol license. What I proposed after talking with Roswell is that if they serve the alcohol themselves, then they should get an alcohol license. But if they, and it's basically, they prepare the food, they serve the alcohol, then they should get an alcohol license. I'm looking on 33, which is page 33, section 4-337. But if they allow caterers to come in and serve the alcohol, which I believe is what Little River Farm is doing, then the alcohol caterers will have to have the alcohol license, and the facility itself will not have to.
Right.
That's what I propose. If y'all think that needs to be something different, then let me know and we'll write it in there. But I think we need to clarify the language that's in there right now. I'll be working with Elizabeth on that to get that done at Ken Gerard's office.
I just think that it would be redundant to require two licenses.
Right.
And I think that's what we're trying to avoid. So if we can avoid that, that'd be great.
Okay.
And I think talking to Mr. Runner, I think that's what he had said his intent was with his facilities, to have the caterer actually have the license, not the facility have the license themselves.
So I guess we're writing this for the future.
Yes.
Okay?
That's fine.
All right, I'm clear on that. So the next one is the publicly owned facilities, which is the next section down. I will say that the Parks and Rec Board is going to be meeting on this tomorrow to discuss what their opinions are on whether or not allowing alcohol, I mean, what they felt about allowing alcohol within the parks, what their opinion is, because I believe that was something that was brought up at the last work session that we had back in December. I wanted to make sure that we were clear on where you wanted to allow the alcohol. Was it, because I specifically put here the historic structure owned by the city and operated. We can specify that that is the birdhouse if we want to.
Already started.
Started.
Birdhouse.
It's so hard for me to say birdhouse too. We've been calling it Hopeful House for so long.
The Thomas Birdhouse?
The Thomas Birdhouse.
Senior.
I can label that specifically, or we can say any facility that is operated as by the Parks and Rec Department.
What do other jurisdictions around here do?
Alpharetta allowed it in the Chamber and Wills Park, and that's it. They specify the two locations. I have not found other ordinances that specified or talked about publicly owned facilities to this in this depth when I did my research.
And once again, if it's being served in those facilities, it would be the caterer that would have to provide the alcohol beverage permit.
Yes.
And I think we have, if we're going to rent out the Thomas Bird House, we're going to have to allow alcohol. So, I mean, at the very least, I think it needs to be allowed there with that same stipulation as far as the permit.
How about the Bethwell House?
They could serve wild turkey.
I mean, I don't see that that's a problem.
Or the pavilion.
Or the pavilion, I mean, I think.
So you're getting to the point where whether you name them, call them out by name, or just say all facilities.
All facilities.
Maybe easier to exclude things if there's versus include them.
I concur with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at this point, I guess we would exclude fire stations, public owned facilities. And City Hall, once that comes online, and a public safety facility, then that comes online. So I'll work with Ken's office on that language as well.
It's interesting to hear y'all debate this, because I have seen this debated. You know, a lot of jurisdictions are like a zero tolerance policy for all city or county facilities, and so I've seen some that simply don't identify them but allow it on the park and recreation facilities, and some that call it out, like what Stacy was mentioning. And the one I'm most familiar with is where we specifically called out certain facilities to allow alcohol on those facilities, catered in, brought in with a caterer, and of course we would require a special event. We actually got to the point where we would require, obviously, a release for the vendor to use that, and then even a specialized tenant insurance policy to cover. Unfortunately, you know, you can set the bar so high, though, with requiring all of that documentation, that folks never use it. It's just too difficult to use. So that's the trick, and so I'll have to work with Stacy on that as
But
we
it's
try to
good
figure
job
out.
security for attorneys.
Agreed, but again, you know, the ultimate objective is the government's, right? We want to make sure whatever your policy objective is satisfied, and not make it such that we've done a good job of papering the file, but no one ever feels like they can use it because we make the documentation so high. But nonetheless, I've heard this debate before. It's this very issue.
Okay. I think I have some direction on where to go with that. The last thing I wanted to get some guidance on was the open container area. The Crabapple Form-Based Code is the area that we are looking at, and I do have a map for you guys to look at, so I'll pass this up here and you guys can pass it around. That's one that I looked at, page 41. I just wanted to make sure that you were okay with what we have defined in the ordinance as where open container is allowed. So where we said that a container is allowed is in, am I reading that page? Yes, 4-533. On that map, T4 open, and T5 transect zones. And then also it excludes the parcels fronting Green Road and Arnold Mill Road. It's a pretty wide area, and I wanted to make sure that you were aware how wide that area is and if you were okay with it. When I talked with Alpharetta and asked them how they depict the boundaries of their downtown district, they said they don't. They said they felt that it was a clear enough distinction between what is commercial and what is residential. And they don't have, there's no map, there's no sign.
So somebody could accidentally break the law, and there's no definitive document to say if it's been broken or not. It's up to the discretion of enforcement person?
That's what it sounds like.
Wow.
And I also mentioned where we were considering allowing open container, and he brought up the question of the hole in the middle of Crabapple, which is Alpharetta, and would it be allowed across their parking lot in the court facility over there? So,
That's for them to police.
We obviously can't allow that, but yeah, it's for them to police, isn't it?
Stacy,
Sorry.
are you through with this
I am.
section here? I still had a question. How does this address serving food and alcohol out on patios, outside the actual walls of the structure, I guess?
I believe that it allows it.
Can I make that interpretation from this section?
I think it, and again, we're not talking about necessarily the Crabapple area, or are you?
Yes.
Yes. Forgive me, I understand. I didn't understand that.
I mean, it would allow you to take it out of the patio, so.
But we talked about what container, when we had before, as far as labeled or whatever. I guess the question is, if they were at that restaurant, could they in fact, without having that plastic cup or whatever, could they have open containers sitting out on the patio? Because I think is that allowed in Alpharetta for people to sit outside the restaurant at a table on the sidewalk?
I'm not sure. I'll find out for sure.
So
I know they do it in Roswell, but I'm not. I'll have to find out for sure.
I had heard that Alpharetta had changed so that it allowed for that. And I think that's one of the things some of the vendors had wanted to see.
And I got this from Alpharetta, so I'll ask them specifically that question. That's a good question.
How about?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
This could potentially. I mean, this is making or reducing the restrictions that we have in place today. Because right now, you can serve alcohol outside, but you have to be. It's really not outside because it ends up being sort of enclosed.
It is enclosed.
Enclosed. It's an outside enclosed area.
Which is the way both Roswell and Alpharetta have gone. So, I mean, if we're going to be competitive for restaurants, we're going to have to allow.
No, I'm all in favor of that because I always thought we were too restricted there.
But go ahead.
If we
I guess that would be the intent. I think part of the discussion is getting us so we are competitive, so our restaurants actually offer the same thing and amenities as what other jurisdictions allow.
Roswell seems to be the least restrictive. Have we looked at Roswell's ordinance?
I did, but I will look at it again. I can't recall off the top of my head because I looked about 30 different ordinances, and they're all very different. So I'll look at that again and see if I can pull that language into ours.
Just from the appearance,
Sure.
anyways, the fact that they serve on sidewalks and parking lots and.
So you're asking the question if they can, and you do want to allow that? Is that what we're talking about?
I think to be competitive.
Okay.
I guess find out what they allow and kind of see if we can tailor ours to work.
Well, and I just want to address this because I don't know if it would be necessarily exclusive to the Crabapple area, but this code that's been presented to you does allow patio sales.
Right.
Understanding that.
But it has to be enclosed.
Right, it has to be enclosed with some sort of a physical barrier, and of course, it even identifies what the policy reason for that is, of course, is so customers don't walk away without having to go through the main area of the consumption.
Well, I guess
outlet.
my point is, particularly with Roswell, they serve on sidewalks right along Canton Street.
Right.
You'd be driving down the curb there,
Yeah,
reach
you
over
can see 'em
and
right
grab
there,
something
grab 'em.
off the table.
I understand.
I'll look at that.
But I guess
I'll bring it
what
back to you.
you need the direction of the council really is we want to make this so it's not too restrictive so that we can be competitive with Alfred and Roswell. Does everybody agree with that?
That's the kind of information we're looking
Yeah.
for.
Yes.
That's the
Okay.
council, as Bill's passing it down, I just tried to quickly give a visual of what that T4, T5, and T4 open area looks like. And that's what I've colored in with my blue pen on there.
Yeah, you stayed within the lines,
I
too.
did pretty good.
Yeah.
You almost ordered me kindergarten.
So are you okay with that map? Or do you want to be a little more restrictive and allow it only in the commercial areas of Crabapple?
I'm okay.
No,
I'm okay
that.
with it. I mean, I think we got to be competitive.
You got to start somewhere, I guess.
Okay.
I just want to follow up, make sure I understood, because I think Bill or somebody asked the question whether or not this applies to all restaurants in,
It's just in the Crabapple area.
just in the Crabapple area.
I've got a question about the map, just looking at it. So, so the T4 restricted area, there are a lot of people that frequent some of those restaurants and then would walk back home to those T4 restricted that's to the south. They're not, is that something we want to consider,
I
including
mean,
that?
to me, it
or-
makes sense if you're walking from
Cans.
Cans to Village Pizza or Vintage Pizza. The way it is now, you got to make sure you walk all the way down the sidewalk. You don't cut through the back, or else you're in trouble.
And then the
Yeah.
T4 areas, Rick, if you just kind of sign.
Yeah.
And the T4 areas north of Crabapple Road that are, similarly situated residentially.
Mark them? Just mark them.
Yeah, to me, it seems like the T4 restricted area, which was not previously allowed, maybe should be allowed.
But that's the area that I'm
Yeah, the
talking
T4
about.
restricted.
I'd like to hear from the Crabapple Community Association what they would think about that, though, so if we can reach
I
out to
think they'll
them.
be very much in favor
They're
of
kind of
it.
a more the merrier.
Yeah.
So far.
So along the frontage of Crabapple Road and then Broadwell Road, would that be allowed there? Because you got that corner, that's Alpharetta. Is it the sidewalk there, or are we saying that?
That's one we're gonna have to work through. If our ordinances don't overlay on top of each other almost exactly, there could be a nuance there.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what that fix is, other than to convince Alfred to allow us to annex that, even if they continue to operate it as a Alfred facility, the dirt should be a part of Milton, so that our laws are the laws that are enforced there. This might be a catalyst to at least push that discussion a little bit further forward than it's been had so far.
But I think regardless, if we allow the T4 restricted to be part of it, it does at least give you a way to go.
Oh.
Yeah.
Scoot down the alley.
It looks like we can add T4 restricted to that list. Well, and it should take care of everything. Okay. I believe that is all I have, unless you have any further questions.
Yes,
So-
I don't want to create, any unnecessary work or difficulty, but understand the open container in terms of in an area like Crabapple, being able to walk around and, that's an advantage. We need to be competitive. I don't know, and I also don't know where to draw the line in what we're talking about today in terms of how it affects other restaurants within Milton. Because if a restaurant in Crabapple is going to have an advantage of being able to serve outside without building, the enclosures that we'd required in the past, I think that restaurants outside of the Crabapple area should have that benefit as well. Now, while we can't let them just walk around any street in Milton with an open container, I think there's pieces of what we're doing here in Crabapple that should be applicable elsewhere.
And I agree with that.
I would too. So that along Highway 9 or even up at Birmingham Crossroads, if you had an outside patio without a enclosed area.
And I can't put like a real good point on that, so if you guys want to think about it and draft something up, and maybe we can talk about that as well.
What is
The good news is that we're starting with the areas where these restaurants are going to exist, we're already starting with overlays, right? So we have a Highway
Right.
9 overlay, a Deerfield overlay, we've got a Birmingham overlay,
Crossing.
we've got a Crab Apple overlay. So we've got the base document to start from, that we really just need to look at it visually and kind of, we'll take a shotgun approach at figuring out what the circle looks like, but then we'll bring it to you and say, yeah, that is what we were thinking, or no, that's not what we were thinking.
Along those lines, what's it, and then maybe it's defined in here, but what is an enclosure? Is it a rail, or is it soft-sided? Is it?
Today, does it
I
direct
believe
you
it
back?
says in there somewhere.
Imaginary.
I believe it's.
It says in, the requirement is that it should be enclosed by some structure providing for ingress and egress through the main licensed premises. The structure should be a minimum of 3 feet above ground level. It does not have to be solid, nor does it have to restrict visibility into or out of the open sales area. It must be permitted and approved by the city's community development department.
So in theory, a patio that you have to go through the restaurant that has a rail and a roof over it would be an enclosed space.
Exactly. The point simply being to funnel folks back through the restaurant
main
before they leave.
Gotcha.
That's right.
Well, it says there's no particular shape to it, so a rope could define a limit. That would be the barrier.
Well, it does indicate a structure.
Yeah.
Is the only caveat.
Today.
But we could change that.
Yes.
Define a structure.
Yeah.
Well said.
And I think what we're saying is look to see how we could relax that a little bit to make it work. See what Roswell does, the way they've got it worded, because especially when we get into some of the other restaurants, even outside of Crab Apple, you may have a lot smaller spot that they may want to have a table or 2 tables outside. And today they would not be building a structure, so they wouldn't meet our current code.
Okay. I'll take a look at it. Thank
Is that it?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we add an executive session by motion and vote? Do I have a motion to adjourn into executive session?
So motion to adjourn to executive session.
To discuss land
To
acquisition.
discuss land acquisition?
Yes, to discuss land.
Second?
Second, yeah.
Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
motion to reconvene.
Yes. Second.
So did you get that? Motion was made to reconvene by Lusk and seconded by Hewitt. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
That sounds like Coons and Hewitt. And that concludes our meeting.